Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and for this Featured Friday episode, we have got an incredible entrepreneur here in today's episode who I can genuinely say, I don't like cliches, I don't like buzzwords, I don't like when we throw around the words like revolutionary and innovative, but I can, because I so rarely use those words. I can genuinely say that what today's entrepreneur is doing within the holistic wellness space is truly unique. And it is changing lives in so many different ways. And for all of us who, as entrepreneurs, we love personal development. We love growth journeys. We love holistic wellness and development. And we're going to learn a lot from today's guest. His name is Andrew Ronchetto. Andrew is the CEO and co-founder of Beyond, which is a pioneering digital holistic wellness platform. His personal mission is to revolutionize holistic wellness, and it stems from a time when he was injured and struggled to find balance, integrated support. I love the fact that from his own needs, he decided to be the change that he wishes to see in the world. Feeling like a traffic cop coordinating between therapists and coaches, Andrew was inspired to create a solution. His superpower lies in bringing technology to life, making it a bridge rather than a barrier to holistic well-being. With a commitment to seamless and empathetic wellness experiences, Andrew leads Beyond with vision and passion. And I can tell you, as someone who's gone deep into what Beyond is doing, I think that Andrew, his company, and his mission and his journey up to this point is a really shining example of how technology and business and entrepreneurship and looking for solutions moves the world and society and individuals forward. So I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Andrew Ronchetto. All right, Andrew, I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. I'm excited to be here as well. And I mean, that intro for me, phenomenal. I couldn't have said it better myself. So
well, thank you. But it means that you've got a lot to live up to today, Andrew. So first things first, you're gonna have to take us beyond the bio and tell us, who's Andrew? How'd you start doing all this incredible stuff that you're into now?
You know, it's really begun with my whole career. I started as a consultant, and through various engagements across multiple industries and facets, I really came to enjoy technology. And with that, I found this unique kind of capability to see how it could fundamentally change people's lives for the clients that I'm working with. Sometimes on those very difficult engagements where you really need that little extra step. And that kind of thrust me into this whole space of how technology can augment us, not because we have automation, and we do, but and other factors that can make life easier, and the way technology is revolutionizing and changing our lives in those ways, but just how it can fundamentally help us at the core of who we're trying to be and help everyone in that way. So my journey with it as a consultant across all of these different experiences has kind of really gotten me into that space. And like you said, I about a year ago fundamentally changed my life, and that happened for a number of different reasons. And what I've really come to appreciate through that, I'll say, evolution into a phase two, a new chapter of my life, is that I've come to appreciate technology in new and different ways than I did before, and how they can help me. I'll tell you, I'm one of those folks where I'm like, if it's not helping, let's jettison it. So very much it's at the core of what we do and how we try to build things. But then secondly, because of that consulting experience, I recognize that we got to stop looking at things as kind of two different coins. Practitioners, coaches, mentors, they have the one experience, and then everybody else, all of us, have a totally different one. And I think that's the uniqueness for me that's kind of gotten me to this point, because I've been through those, dugouts where it's really a grind to get things done, and you need the technology to be there with you.
Yeah, I love the way that you state that. And Andrew, I'm going to say this here on the air, is that it just seems to me in all my conversations on air, and especially my conversations off air with all of you incredible guests that we're so grateful to have on the show, is that there's a rising wave. I'm feeling it from this side of the microphone of the power of and thinking. We're starting to recognize the power of all of these things coming together. And I talked about it at the top of the episode about buzzwords. You know, for how long have we heard the word coexist, whether it's in the political arena or whether it's just in society? And I feel like at the root of coexisting is that recognition of all of these things can and should play together. And the fact that you're bringing technology to holistic wellness and it's born out of things that you've experienced firsthand, I think that's super powerful. So I want to go deeper into Andrew going from injured and struggling to find that balance of that and formula that we're talking about today to actually saying, I'm going to take action. I'm going to be part of the solution, because Andrew, a lot of people feel pain and a lot of people see gaps in the marketplace, but they don't actually go do what it is that you're doing now.
Well, I mean, I'm going to kick it off and just say it this way. It's because of folks like you. And I'm not just trying to say that because we're on the air here, but one of the fundamental things I believe in holistic wellness is it's all about relationships. And you talk about rising tides. Well, I couldn't be where I'm at without the people in my life and with the people that I've been with that have been my clients, that have been my partners. And so it starts with relationships. It starts with the human connection. And I think, you know, you talk about like this growing capacity. I felt that success in my life because of those people around me. And what I think we have to try to do with technology is level up everybody, not just the individual or a practitioner, and think about it as one space or the other, and they're totally different experiences. But think about it as, like you said, and it's the practitioner and the individual. So putting the individual at the center of holistic wellness, you think is commonplace, but how many of us feel like we're more like the product than the actual individual receiving the services, whether it's from technology or practitioners, and not to any fault of their own, but this reality that they need capabilities just as much as individuals do. And at the core of success and growth is really the relationship and the connection and the experiences that we have together with each other. So that for me is kind of how, you talk about my journey over the last year. That's what this last year has really been about, is me being able to lean on those relationships when it's mattered most in my life, and having gotten better myself over the course of that time. But then those relationships, those individuals in my life that I hold so dear, that they have actually helped propel me into this opportunity and given me the space to help build this opportunity. And that doesn't just include my immediate family, which I'm so grateful for, but it includes the community that I've met through South by Southwest, through the Houston Innovation Network at the ION, and so on and so forth. So it starts with community, it starts with relationships, it starts with those people around you. And I think the way we can best enable them is giving them the technologies and tools they need to help you out as well.
Yeah, really well said in so many ways, Andrew. I so appreciate the way that you articulate these things. And listeners, I'm just going to interject this really quickly for all of you, is that Andrew and I were talking off air, and he speaks here on the air about the importance of community and the people around you. And Andrew, you just listed off some of those. South by Southwest, you're fortunate that it's in your backyard, essentially. But for all of us as entrepreneurs, this is a community. I mean, it's fun for me because when you and I connected here today, we've never spoken before this. Obviously, we've exchanged some emails, but I think that we just automatically connect because we have that shared belief that a rising tide lifts all boats. And as entrepreneurs, we all know that we can help each other succeed, and we succeed in the same process. So I think it's really powerful the way that you view these things, the way that you articulate and share them with us here on the air to thousands of people all around the world. And huge shout out to you in the way that you approach that. I want to unpack a key component of it because we keep talking about holistic wellness. We've got to unpack what that actually means, Andrew, because again, it's a term we've all heard. People want to apply that holistic label to so many different things. What's holistic wellness? Why is it so at the center of all the things that you work towards?
So for me, the holistic wellness is about all aspects of your life. I think we sometimes put it in this box of mental, physical, maybe spiritual, and we think about the time we need to spend meditating and maybe doing yoga. Like there's these very prescriptive, defined ways that we've looked at holistic wellness today, but I challenge that. And with the Beyond platform that we've built, we look to challenge that and say, well, holistically, there's so much more to you. And I know buzzword after buzzword, but if you look at your complete being, you think about the 24 hours in a day. That is consumed by how much you may or may not sleep, whether you have a job or you're volunteering, whatever that go-to for you is, family, friends, so your social relationships, maybe there's financial dimensions to it. So there's all these aspects that make you you, and we struggle sometimes to realize how limited and finite time is. And it's a no duh kind of thing to make that statement, but I think because we're always balancing these factors, some of them are more subconsciously looked at than consciously. And I think it's time for us, when we look at wellness and we look at ourselves, that it's time to look at all these dimensions together. I mean, there's thousands of apps out there. We've seen them. We've probably all tried a few of them. But the thing that I keep struggling with is when I stop paying for it, I lose it. When I need to work with somebody else, a different practitioner, it's a totally different experience. And I think there's this need holistically to bring it all back to the center of the individual. What do I need to be successful? And I think some of those things, from a comprehensive look at yourself, begin with being able to see everything going on in your life. I talked about the 24 hours. Well, if you sleep 8 hours of it, if you go to work or some other activity for 8 hours of it, I mean, there's 2/3 of it gone. And we're not even talking about how the fact that we're not robots and we're not that efficient. But I mean, the reality is consciously being able to understand all these facets of our life, and then more importantly, doing something about it, or making decisions as to what's still, from a time perspective, is still available for us, I think is the first step of looking at what it means to look at ourselves holistically. And it's that ability and that understanding at a deeper level of who we are, our motivations, our inspirations, and making sure that we're, I'll say, balancing all of them. Because what is balanced for you is not balanced for me or anybody else. It's just we're learning and experiencing different things, and that's evolving our overall life and our expectations and our potential for growth.
Yeah, really well said, Andrew. There's a few things that I want to call out and a few things that for sure I want to go deeper into. The first thing is you for sure said it way nicer than I could when you said that if we're not taking control of these things, we're only subconsciously thinking about them. I actually, a lot of times I wonder, and I'm just like, are we even at all thinking about them, or is life happening to us? It's something that I ask myself very frequently is, am I living life or is life happening to me? And if we don't have that level of intentionality, which begins with taking a look at it, assessing the landscape, then how can we start to intentionally craft and grow and shape these experiences that we're having? And then secondly, and I want to go deeper here, Andrew, is that you talk about your balance is different from my balance. For example, everyone knows I do 8 of these podcast interviews on recording days. And as an extreme extrovert, I love it. If I only have 2, then I'm really disappointed. It doesn't give me enough energy. I want to do more of them. And so that's not for everybody. I know a bunch of other podcast hosts. One of them comes to mind. I was just on his show recently, and he told me, he's like, dude, I can only do 1 of these interviews a week. Like, that takes so much out of me. So it is to your point that it's all different. And I think you raised a really important point that when we download, let's go with a fitness app. There's one path to fitness according to this one fitness app, is that we need to do this exercise plan for the next 30 days, and then we'll do a different one. There's that one path. Andrew, because I've gone deep into what Be On Purpose is and what it looks like, you've got so many cool things on your website that really showcase it in action. How do you accommodate these things? When you talk about technology being the solution here, how have you built Beyond so that it is, I guess, flexible enough, diverse enough, so that it can cater to all of our unique needs?
No, that's a great question. And I think the first thing I'd start off and say is we had to pick a path and start there. So there's tons of things to continue to build. I appreciate, what we can accomplish in a year, and I think it's been phenomenal. And we've opened up a path for practitioners really to engage with their clients at a deeper level and build those relationships. But to your question, I think the starting point of this begins with an understanding of how we put the individual at the center. And what I mean by that is it fundamentally means that the technology is oriented that way, which means the architecture is oriented that way, which means the policies and the interactions, everything is oriented with the individual at the center. And what that translates into, and as we've thought about design and we thought about procedures, is, for example, data. I mean, we talk about it like you own it, and there are legal, ramifications for not giving ownership to the individual. But what if we took it a step further and said, look, practitioner, coach, mentor, you don't need to own the data. Let us help you transfer the ownership the moment you engage with a client to the client, so that what you own is your IP and everything else is theirs. And there's two things that happen in that immediately. One is, for the practitioner, they don't have all of this pent-up anxiety and concerns about risk that otherwise generally tend to exist there in a digital world. I think why we see a lot of them use simple solutions, Google Sheets and Google Forms, or any other of that nature, because they realize the risk to the business of having something go out into the ether. We've heard a lot of these different data breaches recently, but that losing that could be detrimental to their business. So helping them kind of transact that data becomes their client is a big win for them. And for the client, it's a big win because after the service concludes, they just don't lose everything. It's their data at that point, which means it's their journey, it's their experience. And I think this goes to one of the things you were talking about, and why I talk about the individual at the center, is that we also aren't on 100% of the time. And when we think about that, that's not a bad thing. I think this goes back to not just balance, but this looks at who we are and who we want to be. And not all of us want to be race car drivers or podcasters. I mean, I love building technology. This is hard for me today. But the fact that technology can be at the center for the individual, and we can create experiences across all these different dimensions of well-being that have a similar experience at their core, because the individual is the focus point, it allows us to have a different conversation with practitioners, a different conversation about data, a different conversation about the journeys of life and how quickly people want to pursue them, or how quickly they want to or just take a break, actually. Not even how quickly they want to do something, but how quickly they want to take a break. So for me, that is, it's at the core of how we do it. It's the core of how you build the company, is putting that individual at the center. And then you think about how all these different facets come together. And the last thing I'll comment on this is there's a lot of this desire for instant feedback and instant replays, this gratification that we need. But there's also this reality that journeys are not instantaneous. They're maybe progressive over life, or progressive over at least a period of time. And so we got to think about the long haul aspect of it and still give that comfort and feedback, but the cadence is different. And I think we need to encourage those behaviors a little bit more to help people really get after the things that they're looking for. Again, putting the individual at the center.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way that you share that with us, because I actually think, as an outsider looking in on your business, it's even prevalent in the way that your business shows up in the world. I mean, even going to your website, you can see that you've got clear verbiage when you're talking to practitioners about the value add and how it transforms the game for them. You've got specific messaging with regards to the individuals leveraging this platform for their own unique journeys, like you talked about, how they can retain ownership of that journey. I want to ask you this, because I imagine, just from a strategic and a business perspective, your answer will be a blend of all of what I'm about to ask you. But where do you view the value add? Because obviously, when you set on this journey to develop and launch and continue to grow beyond, it serves so many different audiences. Practitioners are obviously at the root of it. Individuals are the end user benefiting from it. Where's that value add come from? Who are you building for? Who are you thinking about with all the moves that Beyond is making?
Well, I won't say everybody, but maybe I could say. But what I would say is the value add for us isn't about building services. building services that are relevant for practitioners, building services for individuals, and even for some that we have upcoming for corporations, and how those services interact with each other. So when I talk about the value add of Beyond, I'm thinking about how I give individuals, practitioners, coaches, mentors, companies, the things they need to support these comprehensive life journeys or portions of those journeys. And that for me is the key. We've got to put things in their hands that are tangible, meaningful. And I talk about this even with AI. Like I know AI is the whole rage these days, even though it's been around for a very long time. But what I think we miss, and this is where we think about it not just for AI, but we think about it for all the services, is two things. One, how do we make it intentional, both for maybe one or multiple different personas or user groups? And two, how do we make it supportive or supplemental? And that being, the fact that for all the AI in the world, for all the speed and intensity that it brings to every task you give it, at the core of that is still human knowledge, human experiences. And so when I think about supportive and supplemental activities, I'm thinking about how we enhance that human experience. And that for practitioners is different than individuals. We could think about how practitioners can use AI to really discern more information, so it doesn't feel when you go into that 15-minute session with them that 2/3 of it or more is all about them figuring out what you did between the last session and now. And more, it's focused on the decisions you want to make with the client about what's going to happen between this session and the next. And then the second part for the individuals is really thinking about how I can go deeper into who I am at a particular moment in time. And it's a complex topic, but helping use AI to create thought-provoking internal reflection is how we start to think about these things in a way that is helpful. So creating services that offer these capabilities is where the value's at, rather than just creating services with the intention of getting more data or collecting things or then being able to figure out how I one-up or upsell in a different area. Like I'm really thinking about this on a one-to-one, almost like grassroots campaign, how I help you make your life better.
Yeah, that's a big, bold statement, Andrew, and I absolutely love it because it fits in. I mean, you so eloquently stated it. I'm actually going to read it out loud for listeners because when I was doing our research ahead of today's episode, here's one thing that you wrote to describe what Beyond does. At Beyond, we bring together all dimensions of well-being into a single unified experience, encompassing physical, mental, emotional, social, occupational, spiritual, intellectual, and environmental health. That's a big task, Andrew. Those are some big topics that we're talking about here. And I want to ask you this because I've long been fascinated as someone who majored in economics, and I love behavioral economics. I always love looking at the motives of humans and what are our decision points to make changes in life so that we're not just on autopilot, subconsciously thinking about these things and actually consciously taking control of them. From your perspective, as someone who's seen it from the practitioner side, as someone who sees it from the end user side, as someone who is looking at the corporate realm as part of what you're expanding into, what's the catalyst for people? Because a lot of people have life-changing events where maybe they get injured and that's their spark to actually do something, but a lot of us will just glide through life and all of these things may just happen to us. Maybe we focus on some of them. What's the spark? What's the catalyst for most people that you hope makes them say, you know what? It's time today to start actually thinking about these things. Other than, I hope this podcast episode is that for them, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
No, absolutely. So I'm going to say the catalyst for me is probably something we can experience from other parts of the world. So I'm talking specific to those of us in the U.S. We don't like to ask for help. And I think the catalyst here is in recognizing that in asking for help, we can accomplish more in life or have a more fulfilling life. And I think that's the big part. It's not done enough in corporations. I think there's a fear factor between employees and employers. There's a fear factor or a self of defeat, this feeling of defeat for an individual when they have to ask, can you please help? but I think that's the catalyst. Like I've been through so many things in my life where, like I said before, if I didn't have those individuals around me, my team supporting me, my partners, my bosses really going out on a ledge for me, I couldn't have accomplished what I've been able to do. And even in the last year, my wife has been so fundamental in this journey and creating this space to go after it because I asked for help. And so if I think about that as a catalyst, that's the first thing. If we can start thinking about that moment where I just reach out to somebody in some way to connect and to look to grow that connection, I think that's what starts to turn the page on this and for us to start looking at these things more broadly. I mean, from a platform perspective, we're focused on trying to create a space for you to do that when you're ready.
Yeah, really well said, Andrew. I think that is so important because we're not just talking holistic wellness right here. We are talking about business, life, any journey that we're on. Asking for help is the key. Listeners, this is a huge takeaway. And Andrew, I don't know how you're going to surpass that when at the end of today's episode, I ask you for your one takeaway. But listeners, even if there's only one thing you take from today's episode, this is a powerful one. And it's something that I was fortunate when I started my first business when I was 19 years old. I wasn't conditioned by corporate America yet. I wasn't conditioned by society. I was just shamelessly emailing all of my so-called competitors being like, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help me? Can I glean some insights off of you? And that was my fast track to starting to understand how the heck to grow a business, Andrew, because quite frankly, I didn't have an idea. And I feel like, especially as entrepreneurs, we put so much pressure on ourselves to have the answers because our clients look towards us to have the answers. We're serving others, but we have to remember that this is so at the root of all of that. So I love this transparency that you're bringing to this episode. And I do want to transition a little bit and talk to you entrepreneur to entrepreneur because you're one of us. It's the fun part about this show is you're not just talking about your... Yeah, you're not just talking about the subject matter at hand. You're also running a business. You're growing a business. You've built a technology platform that's really changing the game in your space. With all of that in mind, what's been some of the most surprising things for you in starting your business a year ago that you've gone, holy cow, I wanted to get into the holistic wellness space. I didn't anticipate these things as a business owner.
I'm going to say noise. There's so much noise in the system. There's noise for an entrepreneur, what to use, what not to use. There's noise for potential practitioners, clients on everything that they could use, how this is going to be better than the next. And I've said, okay, after been through all of that, what do I understand? What have I heard from others that's going to help me succeed and kind of move through the noise? And I'm hoping that through these types of conversations, we can start to reduce the noise because we see it in social media. I mean, whether you spend an hour on it, 15 minutes, it doesn't matter. We get kind of inundated with lights and audio and all of these factors that overstimulate us. And the same happens in, I would say, entrepreneurship. You start a company and in 2 days, everybody is reaching out to you saying, I've got the best thing for you, HR. I'm like, but there's just me. Or there's just two of us, whatever it might be. So it's the noise factor and moving through that I think is, for me, been the biggest eye-opening. Because I also contributed to that, to be fair, on the other side. And so I have a new appreciation of what it means to move through the noise, to work with different factors of it, and then to decide and discern from all of that what I want to go after and leverage to look to be successful. And I think the last part is I know I'm going to make mistakes. I know that we're going to have to pivot and maybe call that as a nuance of the fact that we built a platform to help people go through journeys. And so pivoting is just naturally a part of that. But I have realized that pivoting is hard. And as an entrepreneur, sometimes it can be detrimental if you don't. And I think that's been important for us, is to focus on how we just continue to learn and understand and move through the noise and continue to make decisions that we think are right in the moment, but then recognize that when new data comes and it's translated in information, there's going to be new decisions and they might contradict the old ones, but that we're using it to move forward.
Yeah, gosh, Andrew, this is such a fun entrepreneurial conversation for me to have. So I'm 16 years into my entrepreneurial journey. And when I look back at my first, honestly, let's lump in like my first 6 years, the noise, that right there, you just touched on such an important topic. I didn't have the ability back then. Now, one, I was young. Two, I was just fresh when it came to being an entrepreneur. I didn't have the ability to discern the noise from the stuff that matters. And so I want to totally put you on the spot here and ask you about what is that stuff that matters? How do we discern the noise from the meaningful stuff? Because, and you talked about the next best solution. Everything's the next best solution. I remember, so I'm from Boston originally. I started my first business in the Boston area. Vistaprint is a Boston-based company. Vistaprint has a really powerful brand and great marketing, and they'll convince you that business cards, that's the most important thing. So Andrew, I spent a month working on the perfect business cards. Then your website is the most important thing. Then your branding is the most important thing. So that's what I got wrong. Navigate us through discerning the noise from the good stuff.
Well, I actually wrote about this recently and posted it on LinkedIn about operations. I think the most important thing is having solid operations. And I've loved the experience working with you and getting to this day and getting to the point and the opportunity to talk with you today, because your operations were fluid and it didn't feel unnatural, and it felt very specific and pointed, all in the effort of making sure that my experience as a guest was beneficial both to me and to you, but also just a great experience. And I think not enough is focused today on operations. I hear this with a lot of feedback for entrepreneurs is you'll get there. And I'm like, man, companies have been saying that for decades. Operations is always like the third or the fourth or the fifth wheel. And by the time we focus on it, it's because we're in a crisis. And I'm just like, well, what if you focus on it at the beginning? And you don't have to go crazy, but just when you're starting to make decisions about how to build your organization, I honestly believe it's like, think about the things that when I'm ready to pull the trigger to buy X or to use Y, that I actually have already thought about what it means to incorporate that into my organization, rather than just saying, I'll leave it till later. So for me, operations is critical. Like, it's what helps you create the right experience. It's what helps you keep a little bit of your sanity. And it's helped me keep my sanity from day one as I've built out Beyond.
Yeah, gosh, Andrew. First of all, I really appreciate those kind words. Honestly, it means the world to me. And obviously we have an entire team that supports making this podcast possible. So I really appreciate your insights there. And I'll transparently share from my perspective, what you just spoke to. I'm a sucker for the feels. And I once spoke to someone from the car manufacturing business, and we were talking about how brands like Kia and Hyundai, they are making legitimate luxury cars these days. And what we used to know as budget brands still retain that budget price point, but they feel luxurious. And I asked, what's the key there? And this person told me, he said, well, the key is think about what you feel. You physically feel. When we get into a car, what do we feel? We feel the steering wheel. The steering wheel has to feel luxurious. We touch the buttons of the car. We need to focus on those touch points, the actual places where people feel things tactile wise with their fingers. That's where we need to focus on and improve that user experience. And Andrew, here you are we're talking about something completely different from car manufacturing, but building this process into our operations and the experience, such a key word. I want to keep echoing it. I think that it's so important for all of our businesses. So huge kudos to you for highlighting that. A year into your entrepreneurial journey, I don't believe it, Andrew, but obviously you've had a lifetime of experience up to this point. I want to ask you this because we ask it at the end of every episode, and I have no idea which way you'll take it, but what's the one takeaway with so much? I feel like you dropped on us so much entrepreneurial advice as well as the holistic wellness stuff. How the heck do you want to summarize for listeners worldwide, knowing that they're maybe seven-figure entrepreneurs who are just making a modest living and they're replacing their full-time income, or all the entrepreneurs who are tuning in? Andrew, what's the one takeaway you hope they walk away from today's episode with?
Wait for it. I'm going to tell you, be yourself. That is the biggest takeaway. I think you being as genuine of an individual as you are and being you, this isn't about individualism. This is about you being you, and you're an entrepreneur. You are a go-getter. You are a stay-up-all-night creative. Whatever it might be you. Because that is what's going to change the world. And I fundamentally believe that that is what it drives us each day to wake up, drives us each day to be excited about what we do and engage with those around us that we want to be, in their lives with. It all begins with you being you. And so if you want to work on that, if you want to make it better, if you want to change it, go for it. If you like you, that is the most important thing. Be you.
Boom, right there. Andrew, that is a heck of an answer. I absolutely love that that's what you chose for this final piece of advice, because I'll tell you what, in the world of business, and as someone who spent a lot of money in 4 years, I don't know why I was sitting in a business classroom, but I was, and they always talk about looking for unique differentiators. There is no differentiator more unique than you being you. So Andrew, that is incredible advice for everyone, wherever we are in our entrepreneurial journeys. I also love the fact that advice fits right in with Beyond's mission of focusing and really improving all of these different dimensions of our lives. So for listeners who want to go deeper into all the incredible work that you're doing, both with Beyond and all the great stuff that you're putting out on your LinkedIn as well, I want to give you huge kudos to that. Drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Well, look for us at hashtag Beyond Platform or at Beyond Platform. We've made it happen across all the social media, and that's where we're going to be. So stay tuned for more to come.
Yes, listeners, and you already know the drill. We are linking to Andrew's business website, beonpurpose.io, down below in the show notes, as well as a link to his personal LinkedIn and his social. So definitely check below in the show notes, wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Otherwise, Andrew, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Brian. This has been awesome. Thank you.